engineering is. So what is peace engineering? I really went back and looked at the work done by Professor Richard Bowen. They organized in 2004 the first symposium on peace engineering. This was done very few people, very few universities, and they tried to define what peace engineering meant. And this time now, and this year in Albuquerque, we are organizing the first global peace engineering conference. So we really need the participation of everybody to help us define, come up with new definitions of peace engineering and really start working on it. I believe this is a way of life. It's not just something that you can only teach a class here or there or attend seminars or conferences. This is about doing something. So here's a definition that Richard Bowen came up with, and there's more in that excellent book that he wrote. In our case, some people, entrepreneurs, some faculty, we got together and tried to come up with a new definition of peace engineering, which I'm sharing here with you in this slide. And also there's a thought-provoking paper that we launched for the conference, encouraging people to really get involved and start peace engineering, think about peace engineering. And what we would like to accomplish in this conference is create a movement and projects, initiatives that have an impact so we can start working together in a global fashion and real collaboration. So this is a definition that we came up with. And we think this is a transdisciplinary merging field that integrates the STEM, the arts, social, financial science, leadership, new leadership, innovation, creativity, entrepreneurship, trust. If we don't have trust, there's nothing that we can do about. And of course, you have to be accountability. And if this is going to work, we need you to participate. So help us define peace engineering. And personally, I believe it's that way of life. So some of the challenges that I see today and that we need to tackle jointly. I created this consortium in 1990. I've been working in the field and doing peace engineering for almost 28 years. In the second General Assembly of ISTEC, which stands for the American Science Technology Education Consortium, I came up with this phrase, one planet, one environment, one chance. Really taking a step back and really thinking globally. Our national anthems, our flags, they don't mean much, right? If we have one planet and we're really messing the planet up, we're really doing a great job contaminating the environment, and we only have one chance. If we really mess up, we're all gone, independent of country, flag, anthem. So ISTEC has accomplished a lot right now. One of the many things that we did, we now have considered probably our digital library collections probably in the top 20 collections in the world. And we did many, many things with high impact, developing labs, accreditation, evaluations, setting up infrastructure, changing policies in many countries, helping them define their science and technology laws so we wanted to encourage them the use of ITC for their development. A great challenge is called air quality. We are beginning to kill ourselves now, so we need to address this collectively. I don't believe any city now is not contaminated, the air is not contaminated. So this is a big challenge, and we really have to support the Paris Agreement. So we've been working very intensively in this area, raising the awareness level and coming up with programs. And this is, again, peace engineering. The other issue is water. I took a picture of this. I attended the World Conference in Singapore on the circular economy and water is key. And this is something that we really need to raise the awareness level and really come up with new, innovative programs, education programs, processes to really deal with the issue of water. The other thing is IoT. That is a big challenge. We're dealing with extreme engineering here. We really need to be aware of what the implications of IoT. How do we deal with it? We have to deal with privacy, invasion of privacy, security, and all of that. This is happening, and people say there's about 50 billion devices that will be connected. And what does that do to us? I mean, how do we deal with this? So we need to start thinking about, again, educating people. It's all about educating. And this, again, I see is part of peace engineering. Artificial intelligence. It's a hot topic. Everybody wants to use it in the sciences, social science, in all walks of life. What does it mean? I mean, we really need to be aware, and this is happening. Everybody's using it. It's an old technology that now has become very accessible, and we can use it in many fields. So, but we have to be aware of the implications that AI brings and the dangers. Here's a good example, a book written by Kathy O'Neill, Weapons of Math Destruction. I encourage you to read all the AI, all this math, all the pattern recognition, what it has done, especially in 2008 when the financial crisis happened. A lot of people benefited, but the poor did not, but the rich did. And she has a good argument here of using AI, all this math, for the good of the people, for everybody. Obviously, we have social networks. We know the implications Facebook had in the US election. What else are they doing in other countries? I know they have targeted many other countries, and there's evidence about that. And again, why? We need to be aware, and we need to educate people that this is happening, and the privacy and how they influence outcomes in many countries. What do we do with the displaced people, the refugees? I mean, we have millions of people displaced. How do we deal with that? I mean, we need to do a better job educating those people, maybe setting up these maquila type of activities and education and providing them work. We need to deal with that, and that, again, that's part of peace engineering. Corruption, that's another big challenge. I mean, corruption's rampant, is on the way up in the world. In some countries, it's just out of control. I mean, we have leaders now become dictators and inviting only their family. So corruption, transparency, I should say. I like the word better, transparency. And this is part of peace engineering. Maybe we need to come up with blockchain to promote better incentives, like come up with environmental incentives using blockchain. Diversity, big challenge and big issue that we need to deal in peace engineering. One key aspect is social responsibility. People need to become responsible for the use of water, contaminating the air, the good use of energy, and disposing trash. Another challenge is what I call globish. It's something that it's interesting. It's the English spoken by the rest of the world, but that is not understood by people in the US and the UK. So this is an evolving language, which I call globish. And this is a challenge. We need to deal with all these languages and diversity, equality, disabilities, et cetera, et cetera. Another challenge is the fourth Industry 4.0 revolution, or the circular economy. Are we really doing a good job educating people about this? Where's the feedback loop? Collaboration. This is a formula I came up with many years ago when I created ISTEC. Then we do not collaborate because that is proportional. Each country eats, drinks, and lives differently. That it's called tropicalization by the Brazilians. And the closer we are and the higher the bureaucracy, the less we collaborate. So we need to change that formula and make sure that we can collaborate across borders. Of course, the challenges of the National Academy of Engineering, everybody knows about that. Here is a link between the Millennium and the grand challenge of NAE. We need to deal with all of this. Here we got global ethics. We have energy. We have capacity to decide, health issues, the gap between the rich and the poor. Interesting. All is peace engineering. And of course, the 17 IFEES of the United Nations, which have been mapped to the challenges of the National Academy of Engineering. So let's work on this. And are we really doing a good job in educating our students? We do educate in engineering. They do innovate. Whenever we innovate, we're going to create some damage, break something. Then we have to go repair. But let's close that loop. Let's bring that knowledge back into educate. And if we do this, then we will have a good circular economy type of education process. This is a function that I really like to use, the exponential function. And this is, I use it with my students. I want the curve to grow. That means that I want my students to be better than me. So I want to make sure that exponent it grows. That means they will be better than me. If I'm a manager, I want to hire people that are better than me so my company can grow. If I maintain that alpha equal to 1, there's no growth, it's static. And if I don't want to hire, or I don't want my students to be better than me, that means that I start decaying. So this is a very interesting function that I use a lot in engineering and also in management and what I do with my students and with my people that I connect with. We need to be better. We need to grow. Then to really make a difference, this is something that we came up with after 20-something years. What is a natural ecosystem where we can have sustained growth? So this is the model we came up with. And one of the key issues here is social responsibility. People need to take ownership on the impact they have in the planet. Like I said, water, air, trash, energy, everything. We cannot there's several countries that in their constitution, they indicate that water is free and it's a right of each citizen and it's given for free. You can't sustain that. So things need to be we need to start addressing all those issues. And all of this again is peace engineering. So let me start summarizing. So it is an emerging field which integrates all these different areas. But the most important thing is we need you to become part of this movement and let's change. And we need you to help us define peace engineering. And as I said, it is a way of life. Here is Steven Pinker. He uses a big data and it's very positive what he says. I mean, data says that, war, poverty, pollution is reducing, but at the same time, we need to be aware that we need to start thinking of more progress and problem solving, like climate change and nuclear war. Those are problems that need to be solved. And all of this, I think, is peace engineering. So what does peace engineering mean to you? That's the challenge that we're posing. We need your help. And we invite you to come to Albuquerque, where all these 4 events will take place. We will be addressing all these issues and challenges that I just talked about. We invite you to come to New Mexico. A lot of interesting things happen in New Mexico. It is the birth of big science, all the labs, and this is where all the heavy science was created and developed, and from here spin off. Here are some of the influential people from New Mexico. Is the crossroads of 2 histories, the Hispano history flowing south to north, and then Anglo history flowing east to west. And we are we're not new and we're not Mexico. We happen to be in the US. This is where we're located. And I want to thank you for your time and for giving me the opportunity to talking to you. I invite you to come to New Mexico, and I hope to see you face to face there in November 12th to the 16th. Thank you.
Okay, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. I am going to share my presentation. Hold on. Okay. So my name is Ravani Sigamani, and I work at UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, which is in Paris, in France. And I'm going to talk to you about peace engineering in relation to UNESCO engineering and the Sustainable Development Goals. So what is quite interesting is talking about peace. The preamble to the Constitution of UNESCO declares that since war begins in the minds of men, it is in the minds of men that the defenses of peace must be constructed. And UNESCO's mandate is to contribute to peace and security by promoting collaboration among nations through education, science, culture, and communication in order to further universal respect for justice and law. And just as Ramiro said earlier, so this is what UNESCO is all about. But how does this relate to engineering? Well, UNESCO is the only UN agency that is mandated to work on engineering education as well as science. So we work on early warning systems for tsunamis or transboundary water management agreements and to strengthen ties between nations and societies. We also have an education sector where we work so that every child, boy or girl, has access to quality education as a fundamental human right and as a prerequisite for human development. UNESCO was actually created in 1945, and through the years, one of our most recognized programs is the World Heritage Sites, which is part of our culture program, which is the protection of heritage and the support for cultural diversity. We also protect the freedom of expression, which is essential for democracy, development, and human dignity. UNESCO aims to create a holistic policy that's capable of addressing the social, environmental, and economic dimensions of sustainable development. For science and engineering policy, and also looking at international scientific cooperation links, we have science where we ensure that the public understanding of science and engineering, as well as the participation of citizens. Once again, exactly as Romero mentioned during his presentation. UNESCO has 195 member states and 8 associate members. There are around 50 offices around the globe, with the headquarters being in Paris. In terms of engineering at UNESCO, the UNESCO engineering program is diverse in terms of culture, education, communication and information, as well as science, where it is cross-cutting, and we aim to draw on engineering-related strengths in all sectors of UNESCO. The UNESCO engineering program promotes human and institutional capacity building, particularly in developing countries, to reflect on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and UNESCO priorities. We concentrate on sustainable development as well as poverty eradication. When we look at peace, we look at a world where people are not in poverty, but beyond that, where there is an equal amount of access to good education, to basic needs, shelter, water. And so in 2000, 189 member states adopted the Millennium Development Goals, which was an effort to reduce extreme poverty in the world and to lift an estimated 1.2 billion people out of poverty, defined as living on the equivalent of less than $1 per day. What is quite interesting is that there were 8 MDGs that were created, and every one of these MDGs, from eradicating poverty and hunger to ensuring environmental sustainability, all of them need science and engineering. However, engineering was never mentioned in the MDGs. I am quickly going to tell you some of the successes of the MDGs in terms of until 2015. So we find that in terms of eradicating extreme poverty and hunger, extreme poverty rates were cut by more than half since 1990. When we look at achieving universal primary education, enrollment in primary education in developing regions reached 91% by 2050. In terms of promoting gender equality and empowerment of women, the world achieved equality in primary education between girls and boys in 2015. When to look at reduced child mortality, the mortality rate of children under 5 was cut by more than half since 1990. In improving maternal health, maternal mortality ratio fell by 45% since 1990. When we look at combating HIV and AIDS, malaria, and other diseases, between 2000 and 2013, new HIV infections fell by 40%, and 37 million tuberculosis deaths were averted. When we look at environmental sustainability, 2.6 billion people gained access to improved drinking water from 1990 to 2015. And then finally, looking at global partnerships for development, in 2014, aid money increased to $135 billion. And this was all great, but there were some problems, or there was some way that all the MDGs were not met. And this is why the Sustainable Development Goals were created, because all targets of the Millennium Development Goals were not fulfilled. In 2015, or just before 2015, we found that there were still over 1.1 billion people who did not have access to electricity. We still had 2.4 billion people with no adequate sanitation. There were 663 million people in the world who lacked access to clean water. 1/3 of the world's population was not served by adequate roads, and we found that 150 million children who were less than 5 years old were malnourished, and they didn't survive or grew up to be stunted. Thus, in 2015, the member states of the UN got together and came up with the Sustainable Development Goals leading to Agenda 2030. Here we find that we now have 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And what's quite interesting is that these goals are quite in-depth compared to the 8 Millennium Development Goals. Also, for the first time, although science and engineering is once again needed for all 17, engineering is now mentioned in SDG 4 on quality education. We find that the SDGs also have a more ambitious agenda, seeking to eliminate rather than reduce poverty, and having more demanding targets on health, education, and gender equality, all topics that Ramiro mentioned as well. What is also interesting is that issues that were not in the MDGs have now been addressed, such as climate change, sustainable consumption, innovation, and the importance of peace and justice for all. When we look at the SDGs, especially 1, 2, and 3, we find that engineering is needed for all of them. We need innovative technologies in farming, medicine, and safe sanitation systems. We need to double the food production in developing countries by 2050 to feed all the people on the earth, and thus definitely engineering is needed. Also, in terms of access to technology, we find that there are inequalities in who shares the benefits and the costs of technology. Looking at digital technology, 75% of people in Africa own mobile phones, which is why mobile learning is also now growing and is very advanced. When we look at clean water and sanitation, we have a huge task. There are 2.3 billion, roughly 1.3 people, that do not have access to a decent toilet. There are 650 million people who do not have access to clean water. And every year, 315,000 children who are less than 5 years die due to drinking dirty water or poor sanitation. Again, engineering solutions are needed for well-planned infrastructure and management. Looking at affordable and clean energy, which is also a new goal that was not in the MDGs, we need investment, and research and development is key. Teaching the know-how to local communities, also in rural communities, is extremely important. And once again, renewable energy is really important as well. Looking at goals 8, 9, and 10, in terms of sustainability, the global production and consumption levels are overshooting. And as Ramiro said, we are now using 50% more of our planet's capacity every year. There is rapid automation in industrial growth. And once again, big data and data infrastructure is the way that we are going into the future, where new technologies as well as new jobs are to be created, which do not exist today. Looking at goals 11, 12, 13, and 15, COP21 aimed to drastically cut carbon dioxide emissions and limit global temperature rise to 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. We talk about also the Paris Climate Change Agreement. We also need more of disaster risk reduction and mitigation in terms of developing countries and small islands and developing states. Buildings and infrastructure need to be able to withstand natural disasters. We also look at eco-efficiency, and we need smartly designed cities which can emit less carbon dioxide. And one of them that is currently being looked at is cities that can emit 80% less carbon dioxide. By 2050, two-thirds of the infrastructure will be in developing countries, and there are now talks to actually get this. When we look at goals 14, 16, and 17, we need solutions to preserve marine life and also, in a big way, reduce plastic pollution in the oceans. We need new technologies of fishing to conserve the ocean, but at the same time to also feed the population. In terms of peace, the SDG on peace, justice, and strong institutions, we need the sharing of knowledge, technology, and building strong, inclusive institutions which contribute to peace. Again, engineering education and peace engineering will be definitely needed in order to get this or to achieve this for the future. In terms of partnerships, we also need sustainable solutions through innovative technologies for networks around the world. When we look at Sustainable Development Goal 5, which is achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls, we know that in terms of engineering, women are largely underrepresented. According to the UNESCO Science Report in 2015, we find that we have the leaky pipe syndrome for women in research, where for bachelor and master's degrees, we find that women make up more than half of the graduates. However, when we go on to PhD graduates, it's only 43%. And in research, we find only around 28% of women. When we look at engineering, the situation is much worse. And we find that with women in engineering in Europe and North America, we generally have around 19% of women. But there are some bright spots as well, where we find, like in Cyprus, we have around 50% of engineering graduates are women. There are also regional exceptions, where we find that the share of women graduating as engineers has risen in sub-Saharan Africa and also the Arab states and parts of Asia. What is quite interesting is that looking at the Arab states, we find that there are generally large amounts of women, and Oman has an astonishing 53% of women in engineering. Looking at Sustainable Development Goal 4 on quality education, as I said, this is the only one that mentions engineering, where they talk about scholarships available to developing countries for enrollment in higher education, looking at engineering and scientific programs. Engineering education is vital in order for us to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. New methods of teaching to entice young students, but also to stimulate innovative solutions for the Sustainable Development Goals is needed. We need networks, and UNESCO has the networks of Category 2 centers as well as UNESCO chairs, which is vital in helping share knowledge and strengthening engineering education globally, as well as working with our partners like IFEES and the GDC. In conclusion, I think that all societies are seeking a new source of dynamism to eradicate poverty, to build sustainable and lasting peace and development. Engineering, science, and technology are vitally important. UNESCO was born or created in 1945 at the Institute of Civil Engineers in London. So engineering has always been a focus of UNESCO. The world has changed since then, but the need for engineering, science, and technology has only deepened, and so have the aspirations of all societies to benefit from progress leading to peace engineering. Given the complexity of contemporary global challenges, such as sustainable consumption of resources and climate change adaptation, supporting and investing in science and engineering education for both men and women is essential for the improvement of societies. Education and training of future engineers and scientists is necessary to develop innovative solutions to the challenges that we face at the moment, as well as to improve the quality of life for all. There's only one planet and one ocean, and UNESCO, together with our partners, is working to ensure that education is the way forward to save our ecosystem and bring about peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravani, and hello everyone out there. I'm going to start sharing our screen. So hello everyone, my name is Mira Olson and I'm co-director of the Peace Engineering program at Drexel University.
Hi, and I'm James Tangora. I'm a professor of mechanical engineer and Mira's co-director in the program as well. Thank you both for introducing this really important topic, and also we wanted to thank you for the opportunity to speak about the Peace Engineering program we started at Drexel. We're really pleased and honored to be part of this webinar, and really looking forward to the conference that's going to start in November. So as you've all heard from Ramiro and Ravani, there are really important reasons to integrate engineering education with sustainability and peace building. And our efforts at Drexel fit into this by training engineers to both work directly in peace building and development, and also so that they use conflict as a consideration for design, just as engineers use safety, sustainability, performance, and cost whenever a system is developed. So we're going to begin our part of the webinar with a short video that introduces our perspective on peace engineering, and then we'll speak a little bit about how we started the program and the program's three main components, which are education, research, and community engagement. So let's start with our video.
Sorry about that, we'll start again.
I believe the vision for this program is uniquely profound. It's a convergence. We're educating students in this new field of peace engineering, and we're developing programs to educate people on the growing role of technology in conflict.
It's one of the most exciting developments in our field in the last decade.
It's different. It's not about politicians sitting down together to bring people together. It is about engineers and folks who are interested in technology and scientists.
All the engineering students that I've met were drawn into that field of study because they like solving problems. And if we're able to reach across all of these self-erected artificial boundaries and borders that we put up ourselves and find ways to work together, we can accomplish amazing things.
All right, so that video we started last year. We were launching the program, and since then we've been seeing really increasing interest in the field by students, but also nicely by other universities and companies who are getting involved. And in that program, I wanted to highlight two people that are really important to that. Joe Hughes, who is also a co-director of the program, and Sheldon Himmelfarb, who is the president and director of the Peace Tech Lab in Washington, D.C., who's been our partner in this. And so the mission of the Peace Engineering program is to educate a new generation of professionals who are able to work professionally at the intersection of peace building and engineering. And this program is the result of a partnership between us at Drexel and the Peace Tech Lab in Washington, D.C. that aims to transform engineering and conflict management using education and research efforts that integrate the technologies and approaches of engineering with the studies and practices of peace building. So Mira is going to put up two definitions that I'll let you read, but you can keep that in the back of your mind, so that way when we're defining peace engineering, we can do it in a manner that's similar to the way in which we define mechanical engineering. And we've been working on this program with Peace Tech Lab for about 2 years, and over this time, we've both come to firmly believe that there really is a global need to integrate the applied sciences with peace building, and that this integration is sometimes hampered by gaps in engineering education. I think we've become comfortable in saying this because, in part, the idea to integrate engineering and peace building didn't originate with us, but it's something that's been building in the peace building, diplomatic, defense, and engineering communities for some time. Now, the adoption of technologies and engineering approaches into peace building has been happening very much organically, from using sensing approaches and data analytics to monitor and evaluate hate speech, to considering, as been brought up before, ways in which clean water can be produced and distributed to reduce both political and health vulnerabilities, to now using systems analysis approaches that allow us to consider issues that sit at the nexus of water, energy, land, food, and health systems. So the Department of State, the U.S. Institute of Peace, the Defense Department, the National Academies of Engineering, they all began to study this integration formally in the early 2000s. Using a series of workshops and roundtables. And from those roundtables, which I would actually recommend, if you go to USIP, there's some great documents on those roundtables. But they came up with three important conclusions. The first of which is that there is a need in both peace building and stabilization to leverage engineering approaches and technologies if we are actually going to be able to address conflict and the drivers of conflict effectively. Second, that organizations like the Department of State have to take full advantage of science and technology if they're going to be able to shape and sustain a peaceful, just, and hopefully democratic world. And that these communities do need engineers with integrated skill sets, and those skill sets are ones that the higher education are not currently providing. So in summary, we have this need for technology and technical approaches in the conflict management community, but there are big gaps in the education of engineers that are preventing it from happening successfully. Now, engineering colleges are well suited to generally address gaps in higher education and research, but it's only by partnering with peace building organizations that we're going to be able to transform this engineering education so that it directly integrates with conflict management. So that's a bit of the background and motivation for the program. I'd like to give you now some details about 3 elements of the program which are laid out on this slide. The first of which is education, which for us includes both undergraduate and graduate degree programs, and newly some online certificate programs. We're going to focus on the graduate program next, but the program itself is comprehensive. Second element is research that gets both conducted in laboratory-based labs at Drexel and also in the field with peace-building organizations. And third, and perhaps most importantly, is the community engagement piece, which also includes an urban technical extension program that we're using here in Philadelphia, where we bring the technical resources of the university for the benefits of communities. Now I'm going to talk briefly about the master's program, and then I'll turn it over to Mira. She'll talk about the more interesting and important elements of the research and community engagement.
So in building a new program, and in fact a new discipline in peace engineering, it's been really important to us that the research, education, and community engagement pieces not only grow simultaneously, but also feed into and inform each other. For example, it's critical that educational elements are contextualized and research-based, and that the research activities are community and stakeholder driven. So I'll give you a couple of examples of what we're doing in each of those arenas. And then we'll get to the master's program. So our challenge in building an educational program is in merging technical expertise with an understanding of the social dimensions of conflict. We've been able to overlay that broader understanding into the traditional engineering curriculum through things like community partner design projects and courses, which I'll describe later. And in fact, engineering graduates are typically quite good at designing to technical standards, but often aren't prepared for when a perfectly good technical solution simply isn't adopted, or is abandoned when it can't be maintained, or ends up generating conflict unintentionally within or among communities. So with peace engineering, those social dimensions, or the non-technical constraints, become integral components of the design process. It does require a broader understanding of the larger system at hand and of the role that engineering and, in fact, the engineer, him or herself, plays. So we've thought a lot about what it is that we engineers need to learn, and then, of course, how do we teach it?
All right, so this slide lays out the basic sequence of courses that we use for our master's program, and this has a mix of both technical courses and social science courses. And if anybody is out there and interested in seeing details on the sequence or with what's within each course, we're more than happy to share it. We would love it if our program was adopted by other schools as well. So this program, the graduate program, is designed to take an engineering student who already has an undergraduate degree and to shape their technical skills so that they're applicable to peace building, and also so that they understand how to engineer systems using conflict and the drivers of conflict as formal considerations. The program is designed to have three components. We want the students to develop an advanced skill set in the technical field that pertains to building. We want them, secondly, to understand the social elements of conflict. And three, they should leave here with a toolbox of transferable skills, such as negotiation and communication, that enables them to succeed in peace building as leaders in the STEM field. So this kind of develops their abilities along three fronts. The technical, clearly, if you want to have a graduate degree in engineering, the social sciences shape what they're doing. But these transferable skills are often the ones you might hear called as soft skills, but they're ones that a lot of companies identify of what's missing from their graduate engineers. And so we want to make sure these are embedded in the program. This plan of study has, at least in Drexel, 42 credits of courses. Each course that we run is 10 weeks and counts for about three credits. But importantly, there's also a summer of experiential learning where the students work with peace building and community service organizations. So in the first year, which is laid out fall, winter, spring, there are three sequences of courses the students take. The first are our core peace building competencies, like peace building, strategic conflict management, and all the other skills that are required in the peace building field. And these are generally not in a applied science degree. The ones that you might see in purple, we co-teach those with senior people at the Peace Tech Lab. So those are co-taught both by engineers and somebody who has experience in peace building. Our systems analysis courses gives the students the ability to look at problems from a systems perspective, look at how multiple subsystems are interacting so they can find leverage points. We also do a lot of data and analytics, both qualitative and quantitative, so that the students can evaluate what they're doing and then ultimately apply this so they can work in communities using a community-based design course and then into the experiential learning. Now, we want the summer experiential learning to serve for a couple of reasons. A, for the benefit of the student, but there's also, this is the opportunity that the student starts building a relationship with an organization, and that they can start looking at questions that the organization might have and use those questions that the organization or even a community might have and use that to shape their second year of courses. So their second year courses at the bottom where there's a concentration on their technical electives. That's where they're developing a skill in an engineered system. It could be in WASH, it might be in machine learning, systems analysis, software development, mechanical design. But hopefully at the time they're taking these advanced courses, they're doing some research, right? So they're building up on the experiential learning and simultaneously taking social science classes. So they're shaping the way in which they're applying technical skill sets to a research problem that has importance to an actual customer or organization. So that's our general program in a nutshell, and I'll give it back to Mira.
Thank you. So in addition, we've also designed a database of case studies, which I'll give you a little taste of here. So in addition to defining a new discipline and a degree program in peace engineering, we're also working to apply a peace building lens to all traditional branches of engineering, and we hope that this will help. So this database provides examples of engineering projects being applied in peace building activities, or maybe of peace building initiatives drawing on technical interventions, or in some cases even technology or engineering being at the root of a community conflict. So this is all free and open access, and we can provide links. So you can search by either engineering category. So up here we see infrastructure. You can also search by peace building category down here and find several examples of relevant case studies. So this doesn't necessarily give you a ready-made homework problem that you can use in class, but for each case study, as you can sort of see over here on the right, we give you the context from which you can develop examples and exercises along with the key intersection between engineering and peace building. So to that takeaway of how the engineering and the peace building are working together. So we hope that that's a valuable resource. Okay, moving back to our program elements, I want to talk a little bit about research. So as a new discipline, there really is no long-term research agenda for peace building. We're working to define it, and we invite you to join in that conversation. So what is the approach we'll take to identify and analyze and address issues of conflict and community well-being? How do we empower communities to address conflict and progress towards peace? What is the role of engineering and technical innovation? How do we use and access data? How are population growth, climate change, competition for resources, and human displacement changing the nature of human condition? So certainly more questions than answers, for sure. And actually, I think that's been one of the main takeaways for some of our students as they've been engaged in various research projects, ranging from things like transboundary water management in the Middle East, or supplying renewable energy in regions of conflict or disaster, or countering hate speech using social media. So certainly big questions. As a first step, we are soon convening a series of workshops. We're partnered with Arizona State University and their Center on the Future of War, designed to bring high-level civilian, military, humanitarian, diplomatic practitioners, and policymakers all together with experts in science and engineering and technology, conflict and human rights, and applied research in order to help define the research gaps, identify the gaps in the new field of peace engineering, and then to start prioritizing what's needed, the empirical analysis and the research needs for successful community-directed progression towards peace. So at the heart of this, in doing this work, we're building strong partnerships with communities and community organizations. In our program, we see that both locally and overseas. So one partnership that I just want to highlight is one that we have with a local urban farm. It's in Philadelphia. And they're dedicated to providing safe space and nourishment and growth opportunities for people who are struggling with homelessness and housing instability. So Sanctuary Farms is their name. They were founded about 2 years ago, and they're already supporting the community with organic produce, transitional employment opportunities, and a gathering space for eating, learning, and building healthy relationships. So our involvement, Drexel's Engineers Without Borders chapter has helped build the garden beds. So this is one of the early pictures that we can see. A shade structure that now collects water, and we've installed some solar panels as well. We've also integrated it educationally. Drexel student design teams have performed a water budget analysis of the garden. So they've looked at what can be collected from rainwater, what's available from other sources, and they've designed a drip irrigation system, all with a contextualized understanding of the social and economic role that the garden plays in the community. So that's, you know, things that we were already doing educationally that we were able to bring a peace building lens to. And in one of my favorite ways that we've worked together, this really was a truly collaborative, community-driven research project. So it really was our group working with the community to answer questions that they have. So Drexel students, you can see the food production model there. They built system-level analytical models of both the technical resources in the garden and also the social impacts. So this food production model considers not only overall food production, but also things like employment opportunities or total label hours for different ways that you'd use the garden, markets for selling foods processed from the garden. So for example, some of the community members have been making jams or sauces, and we're trying to find markets to sell those. And then their question was how to optimize how much produce to direct towards that kind of activity versus how much they should have available for the community to eat. And so it's a systems level problem. There's both technical aspects, and there's also what are the social elements that can come out of that as well. So as engineers, we've been involved as long-term and consistent partners throughout this project, which has absolutely improved our engineering work pretty much at every single stage that we've been working with them. And this is exactly how we want to model community engagement. And I think my favorite peace engineering takeaway from this partnership came very early on in the project. Everything was proceeding pretty normally with community engagement and design, and everything was going well with their normal expected slew of technical obstacles like rain, trouble getting permits, utilities, things like that, until we all of a sudden hit a social barrier that actually could have sunk the entire project. So it turns out that the vacant lot that you see there that was selected for the garden was where all the neighborhood kids gathered to play baseball. So we saw firsthand that even the best designed projects with very clear redeeming social value can unintentionally create community conflict without knowing it. So fortunately, in this case, this was solved peacefully. It was resolved by walking through the neighborhood with the kids and identifying another suitable play space, as well as throwing in a collection of baseball equipment. But even very locally, we saw the potential for well-intentioned development and engineering to unwillingly cause conflict. And so the clear necessity for coupled peace building and engineering. So it's been a really great partnership and learning opportunity for our students in sort of all the elements that we like to see in our program in terms of research and education and engagement. So I think with that, I will close. I thank you all for your attention. I encourage you to contact us with any questions, and I will turn this back over to the moderators. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for participating. Great presentations. I know there's some questions. I invite you to look at the Q&A and look at the questions. Some of you may want to give it a shot answering.
Hi, Ramiro. I don't
Hello,
know.
yes.
Hi, this is James from Drexel. I was reading through one of the participants, Steve Fernandez, asked a lot of good questions. I'm gonna take an easy way to answer it by not answering his question, but to kind of back his question. He raises the point of, what is peace engineering's position about the military? So much of our engineering and even our economy gets driven towards the development of military technologies. And I spent 16 years in the Navy and still do research for the military, and I think it's a difficult position. The only thing I can say is that a lot of people in the military are working on the peace building side too. Some of our better partners are people in the civilian affairs organization we just met with one of the general's aides, who's Afghanistan. And they're as troubled as we are in the way in which peace building and stabilization occurs, and are, at least at some levels, are really willing participants in trying to do this better. So I'm not suggesting that there isn't a really difficult problem in that so much of our economy goes into the killing of people. But I would say our position, if the outcome is to have peace and conflict resolved nonviolently, we may have some willing partners in people we wouldn't initially expect, and the military, or at least the military. You can't really say the military, because there's the leaders and there's Congress and the people to direct and do things, and then there are lower level people with smaller budgets that are trying to figure out ways to do it better. But a lot of the people who are in the funding, the Office of Naval Research, the Army Research Labs, the lower levels of dollars that are working at basic research, are starting to fund programs so that we don't get to kinetic warfare. So I think we in the peace engineering community have to address this from a systems perspective and find the right leverage points so we can use their resources to our advantage and make it so that the military never has to be used forcefully.
And I'll add, hi, Steve. We met at the Engineering for Social Justice and Peace conference a few months ago. And I'll also point you to a paper that Darshan Karwat just put out, where he really does challenge engineers to think about how they use their social capital, what they want to work on, and what they choose to work on. And I think you raised some very good questions about the role of the engineer as a person in deciding what they work on and how they want it applied. So thank you for bringing it up.
Maybe I could answer the second question of Steve Fernandez. And if you're okay with that, Ramiro?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, so in terms of sustainable energy, and I know, moving from to renewable energy from fossil fuels is a huge thing. And at UNESCO, we had a UNESCO energy program, but we also work with UN Energy. And a big part of that, from UNESCO's standpoint, is education. And I think that in order to change the mindsets, but also in terms of peace engineering, we need education not just at the engineering level or at tertiary level, but also at primary and secondary school levels. It's taking the education right back, taking it to rural areas. I mean, UNESCO and the UN concentrates a lot on developing countries, and that's where we say that, education is key, is very important. But bigger than that is also working with governments, working with organizations like the UN, which are intergovernmental, and with networks and universities and, all policymakers. Because at the end of the day, the only way to change mindset is to bring all key players and stakeholders together to discuss it and try to find a solution. Because working alone or in a vacuum creates the inequalities, which actually does not lead to peace or peace engineering either. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to add a couple of things. Yes, there's a fine line here with the military technology and technology used for the killing, all that. But also realize that GPS was developed for the military, but GPS is also being used for the well-being of different communities globally. The internet is something that came out of DARPA. So a lot of technology gets spun off and it's used for the well-being of the whole world. So I'm just saying that a lot of good things have come out of that research. And yes, the problem, as I see it, is all about education and education at all levels. I'm going to take it to another level. We need to educate the leadership. Yes, we have to do a good job with K through 12 and the university level, but we need to constantly educate our leadership. We need to make sure they're willing to learn. This is the thing. I mean, some people become so arrogant. Then the moment you're arrogant, you don't learn. People need to be more humble and be open and constant learn. It's lifelong learning. Thank you. Anybody else want to add or answer more questions?
So we can take another question.
I guess we meant me on this one. So Bernard Rameau had a question about peace engineering. Seems to be more than sustainable. I'm just rereading his question. Seems to be more than sustainable development techniques. Sustainable development is a goal that I understand, but it doesn't trigger peace automatically. Most developed countries are not the most peaceful. He's absolutely right. And why we differentiate peace engineering from sustainable development or developmental engineering or other humanitarian engineering is that we're trying to carefully define peace as the ability of a community to resolve conflict nonviolently. And so we're not even saying that conflict is necessarily a bad thing. Conflict sometimes drives communities, and conflict happens at all different levels. We just want to make sure that the elements are in that society so that conflict gets resolved nonviolently. And USIP is a very nice document that identifies what generally makes communities able to resolve conflict nonviolently. And there are 5 elements, and I won't remember them all directly, but one is security, rule of law, participatory government, basically humanitarian and health and well-being. And there's one more, I'm not sure why I'm not remembering it, but there are social structures that work towards a peaceful society. And so we have to be careful not to define peace as a state of mind necessarily, but as a true outcome that has to do with violence. And so when we're looking at sustainable development, like he brings up, you can do development and cause a lot of conflict. Well, we just have to make sure that conflict is a consideration when you're doing that sustainable development. There are plenty of engineering efforts for sanitation, for roadways, for waterways that are sustainable, meaning that they're going to last and they're not going to abuse resources, but that they empower people in a manner that causes violence. And so if we start introducing conflict or the drivers of conflict as criteria in an engineering development of a process or a product, it changes the way we do it. And so that's a slight difference between peace engineering and sustainable development without conflict as a criteria.